My name is Chloe Adams, and this happened when I was 15 years old. To this day, it remains the single scariest night of my life, and even now, years later, I can still see every detail as if it happened yesterday. People laugh sometimes when I tell them I'm still afraid of sleepovers, but unless you've been in a situation like mine, you can't understand how fast a night of fun can turn into a nightmare. It was October, the kind of chilly fall night where the air smells faintly like leaves and wood smoke. My best friend at the time, Madison, invited me and two other girls from school, Kelsey and Brooke, to stay over at her house for the weekend. Her parents were going out of town, which made the sleepover feel extra exciting because we knew we'd have the house all to ourselves. Madison lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood, the type with wide yards, fences, and woods that stretched endlessly behind the houses. In the daytime, her place always felt warm and safe, but at night the woods pressed against the backyard like a solid wall of black, and even as a kid, I always thought it looked unsettling. The evening started like any normal sleepover. We ordered pizza, spread out sleeping bags in the living room, and played music too loud while scrolling through TikTok and laughing about dumb inside jokes. Later, we put on a horror movie, the kind that's more cheesy than scary, but when you're with friends, even the bad jump scares make you scream and throw popcorn. By midnight, we were buzzing with energy, too wired to sleep, and Madison suggested we go outside and tell scary stories on the trampoline in her backyard. It sounded fun at the time, so we all pulled on hoodies and went out into the crisp night air. The moment we stepped outside, I felt uneasy. The motion light above the back door clicked on, flooding part of the yard with pale yellow light. But everything beyond that faded into blackness. The woods loomed close, and every rustle of leaves carried across the still air. We climbed onto the trampoline and lay on our backs, looking up at the stars as we took turns telling stories. It was fun at first, but about 20 minutes in, while Kelsey was in the middle of some story about Bloody Mary, I noticed something strange. A faint crunching sound, like footsteps on dry leaves. I froze, listening harder. At first I tried to dismiss it as an animal, but it didn't sound random. It was steady, like someone walking slowly through the trees. I whispered to the others to be quiet. For a few seconds we sat there in silence, and then it came again, 2 slow, deliberate steps. Madison forced a nervous laugh and said it was probably a raccoon, but I could tell she didn't believe it herself. My heart was hammering as we climbed off the trampoline and hurried back inside, locking the back door quickly behind us. We made jokes about being paranoid, but none of us suggested going back outside again. Back in the living room, we changed into pajamas and settled into our sleeping bags, scrolling through our phones in the dim glow of the TV. Eventually, Brooke fell asleep first, curled up under a blanket, and Madison and Kelsey dozed off not long after. I was the only one still awake, scrolling on my phone when I heard it. A faint tapping sound. At first I thought maybe it was a tree branch against the siding, but then it came again, sharper this time. Tap, tap, tap. I realized it was coming from the big window that faced the backyard. Slowly, I lowered my phone and turned my head toward the glass. At first, all I saw was my reflection and the faint outline of the yard beyond. Then my breath caught in my throat. There was a face, pressed right up against the window, pale and ghostly in the dim light, with wide eyes staring directly into the roll. My blood ran cold as I realized whoever it was smiling. Not a friendly smile, a slow, unsettling grin that stretched too wide. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. I just sat frozen, clutching my phone in my hand like it could save me. After what felt like an eternity, the face pulled back into the darkness, disappearing completely. I finally snapped out of it and shook Madison awake, whispering frantically that someone was outside. She didn't believe me at first, groggy and annoyed, but when I pointed at the window, we saw it. Faint fog on the glass, the kind you leave when you breathe too close. That was all it took for her to panic. She woke Kelsey, and the 3 of us stood by the window, staring out into the darkness. Nothing moved. The yard looked empty, silent. Kelsey tried to convince herself it was a trick of the light, but I knew what I saw. Madison locked every door and window again just in case, and we all tried to laugh it off, but the tension hung thick in the air. We huddled together under blankets, pretending we were fine. Sometime after 3 in the morning, I must have drifted off, but a new sound jolted me awake. A creak. Faint but clear, like a floorboard groaning under someone's weight. My heart skipped. It wasn't coming from the living room, it was upstairs, above us. I sat up quickly, shaking Madison awake again. She listened for a few seconds before she heard it too. Another creak, then another. Someone was moving through her parents' bedroom upstairs. We were frozen, staring up at the ceiling as the footsteps grew closer, moving slowly down the hall. Brooke finally stirred awake, confused by the tension. Before we could explain, a loud thud echoed above us, making all of us jump. Madison grabbed her phone with trembling hands and dialed 911, whispering frantically that someone was in the house. As she spoke, the sound of footsteps shifted. Now they were on the stairs, coming down one slow step at a time. I'll never forget the way that felt. The sound of someone descending into the dark living room where 4 teenage girls sat huddled together, terrified out of their minds. We didn't dare move. The dispatcher told us to stay quiet, but whoever was in the house already knew where we were. The steps reached the bottom of the stairs, and then silence. We held our breath, waiting, staring into the shadows. The air felt thick, like the moment before lightning strikes. Then suddenly, headlights swept across the front windows as police cars pulled into the driveway. Red and blue lights flashed against the walls, sirens wailing. The intruder must have panicked because we heard the back door slam open, the lock snapping under force. Officers flooded in within seconds, shouting commands, their flashlights cutting through the house. They searched every corner, every closet, every inch of the yard, but the intruder was gone. Whoever it was had slipped back into the woods, vanishing without a trace. The only sign they'd been there was the scratched-up lock on the back door. One officer pointed out that it looked like someone had picked it with a tool. He told us we were lucky we'd called when we did, because whoever broke in hadn't come to steal anything. They'd come straight downstairs toward us. Madison's parents rushed home, horrified and angry. They tried to reassure us it was just some burglar, but the truth was written all over their faces. They were terrified too. None of us slept that night. We just sat together, watching the police go in and out, feeling like the shadows of the woods outside were pressing closer with every passing minute. In the weeks that followed, I replayed that night over and over in my head. The face at the window, the slow steps on the stairs, the heavy thud upstairs, as if the intruder wanted us to know they were there. The scariest realization came later, when I thought about the timeline. If I saw that face at the window around 2 in the morning, and we didn't hear the first creak upstairs until after 3, that meant one of 2 things. Either there were 2 people, one outside, one inside, or the intruder got in after we went back to sleep, which means they stood outside watching us, then entered the house while we were too scared to move. Even now, as an adult, I can't stay in a house alone overnight without checking every lock 3 times. I can't sit by a big window in the dark without remembering that pale face pressed against the glass. People tell me it's rare for things like that to happen in real life, but I know better. I know there are people out there who wait for nights like that, who watch from the woods, who slip into houses just to see what they can get away with, and sometimes you're unlucky enough to be the one they choose. That night changed me forever. Sleepovers stopped being about movies and fun. They became a reminder that the thin line between safety and danger can vanish in a second. And every time I hear a creak in the floorboards late at night, I still wonder if someone is already inside, standing just out of sight, waiting for me to notice. My name is Emily Carter, and when I was 16, I experienced something at a sleepover that still makes me question what's real and what isn't. I've always been a logical person, never the type to believe in ghosts or demons, but what happened to me and my friends that night has haunted my dreams ever since. People can dismiss it as a nightmare or say we imagined it, but I know better. We all know better. It was the middle of winter in upstate New York, the kind of cold that makes the air sting your lungs. My friend Jessica had invited me and 2 other girls, Natalie and Erin, to spend the night at her house during winter break. Her parents were out of town on a weekend trip, and she'd promised us a night of junk food, movies, and gossip. Jessica's house was old, over 100 years, she told us. Tall and narrow with creaky floors, drafty windows, and that faint smell of old wood that never quite goes away. At first, it just felt cozy, the kind of place you'd want to curl up with blankets and hot chocolate. But as the night went on, that charm shifted into something else, something darker. We started the evening upstairs in her room, playing music, painting our nails, and joking around. At some point, Erin suggested we try something scary. At first, she meant watching a horror movie, but then she said, "What if we play with a Ouija board?" Jessica's eyes lit up immediately. Apparently, her older cousin had left one in their attic years ago, and she thought it would be hilarious to freak us out. Natalie and I were hesitant, but Erin and Jessica were already daring each other, so eventually they wore us down. Jessica disappeared into the attic and came back with a dusty old Ouija board, the kind that looked like it had been sitting there for decades. The wood was faded, the letters slightly chipped, and the planchette had scratches across its surface. We set it up, and the floor of her bedroom lit a couple candles for atmosphere and sat in a circle. I remember laughing nervously as Jessica placed her fingers on the planchette and told us to do the same. "Is anyone here with us?" she asked in a mock-serious tone. At first, nothing happened. We giggled, rolling our eyes. But then slowly the planchette moved to yes. I immediately accused someone of pushing it, but all of them swore they weren't. We asked a few more questions, basic stuff, like what its name was, how old it was, and where it came from. The answers spelled out didn't make much sense. The name looked like gibberish, and the age came out as 6666, which made us laugh nervously, like someone was trying too hard to be spooky. Then Natalie asked a question that changed everything. "What do you want?" The planchette slid slowly across the board, spelling out one chilling word. You. We all jerked our hands away at once, screaming and laughing, but deep down, I wasn't laughing. The way it spelled that out felt deliberate, like it wasn't just some random movement. Jessica tried to joke about it, but we decided we'd had enough and shoved the board back into its box. Erin teased us for being scared, but even she looked uneasy. We thought that was the end of it. We were wrong. Around midnight, we moved to the living room downstairs to watch a movie. The house was quiet except for the sound of the TV and the occasional groan of the old radiators. At some point, I got up to grab a soda from the kitchen, and that's when I noticed it. The Ouija board box was sitting on the counter. I froze, confused, because I was sure Jessica had put it back in the attic. I called out, asking if she'd moved it, but she shook her head, frowning. Nobody admitted to touching it. We shoved it into a cabinet and tried to forget about it, but the mood had shifted. Every creak of the house made us jump. The shadows seemed darker, heavier. During the movie, Natalie gasped suddenly, pointing toward the staircase. "Did you see that?" she whispered. We all turned, but the stairs were empty. She swore she'd seen someone standing halfway up, just a figure watching us. Jessica tried to laugh it off, but I could see she was rattled. She turned on more lights, but it didn't help. The air in the room felt colder, like a draft was creeping in from somewhere. We finally decided to set up our sleeping bags in the living room so we'd all be together. Around 2 a.m., everyone else had dozed off except me. I was lying there staring at the ceiling when I heard it, a faint scratching sound. At first I thought it was coming from outside, like a tree branch against the siding, but then I realized it was coming from inside the wall, right behind me, long deliberate scratches dragging downward. I sat up, heart racing, and looked around. That's when I saw it. The Ouija board box, sitting in the middle of the living room floor. I swear to God, none of us had touched it since putting it in the kitchen cabinet. I scrambled to wake Jessica, whispering frantically. When she saw the box, her face went pale. She grabbed it, stormed into the kitchen, and shoved it into the trash can under the sink. We all agreed to ignore it, to just get through the night, but none of us really slept after that. Around 3:30 a.m., Natalie sat bolt upright, breathing heavily. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. We all listened. From upstairs came the unmistakable sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate, pacing back and forth. The floorboards creaked with every step. Jessica's voice shook. "No one else is home." The footsteps stopped suddenly, and then 3 loud bangs echoed through the ceiling like someone slamming their fists against the floor above us. We screamed, grabbing each other in terror. Then the banging stopped and everything went silent. The silence was worse than the noise because it felt like something was just waiting. Finally, Jessica grabbed her phone and called her parents. She was crying, begging them to come home. While she was on the phone, Erin whispered, "Don't look at the stairs." Of course I looked. Standing at the top of the staircase was a figure. Tall, dark, with no features I could make out. It just stood there, motionless, watching us. My throat closed up, and I couldn't even scream. When I blinked, it was gone. Jessica's parents came home within an hour, furious and terrified. Her dad searched the whole house but found nothing. The trash can where we'd put the Ouija board was empty. The board was gone. None of us ever spoke about it in detail again. We tried to move on, but even now, whenever I hear footsteps in a quiet house or scratching in the walls, my stomach drops. People can tell me all they want that Ouija boards are just toys, that nothing about them is real, but I'll never forget that night. The way it spelled out you, the way the box moved on its own, and the figure watching from the top of the stairs. I know what we saw, I know what we heard, and I know that whatever answered us that night, it's still out there.